The emergency klaxon pierced through the Mojave Desert air at 3:47 a.m. Its mechanical shriek echoing off the concrete walls of the deep space communications, complex like a dying animal's last cry. Dr. Elena Vasquez bolted upright in her narrow bunk, sweat cooling on her skin as the red emergency lights bathed everything in hellish crimson. She'd been dreaming of Moscow again, of snow-covered streets and her father's disappointed face the last time she'd seen him alive. All senior staff to Control Room Alpha immediately. The intercom crackled with Director Harrison's voice, tight with barely controlled panic. This is not a drill. Elena's bare feet hit the cold concrete floor of her quarters, the chill shooting up her spine as she grabbed the first clothes she could find. 3 years of living in this underground facility had taught her that emergency calls at this hour meant one of two things: equipment failure or contact. Given the tremor in Harrison's voice, she suspected neither would be good news. The corridors thrummed with activity as she ran toward the control room, her security badge bouncing against her chest. Other scientists and technicians moved with the same urgent purpose, their faces pale under the harsh fluorescent lighting. The facility's recycled air tasted metallic, tinged with ozone from the massive computers that never stopped humming in the depths below. Control Room Alpha spread before her like something from a fever dream. Banks of monitors displayed cascading data streams, their blue glow painting the faces of the night shift crew in ethereal light. The massive wall display showed a three-dimensional representation of local space, dotted with the positions of satellites, debris, and something else entirely, something that shouldn't exist. Jesus Christ, whispered Dr. Marcus Chen, the facility's lead astrophysicist, his usually steady hand shaking as he pointed at the central display. Elena, tell me I'm hallucinating. She followed his gaze to the readouts, streaming across monitor station 7. Her breath caught in her throat as she recognized the mathematical patterns flowing down the screen like digital rain. Prime number sequences, Fibonacci spirals, fundamental constants of physics, transmitted with a precision that made her skin crawl. How long has this been coming in? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. 18 minutes. Harrison appeared beside her, his silver hair disheveled and his usually immaculate shirt wrinkled. Started as background noise on the deep space array. Our AI systems flagged it as anomalous, then began isolating the patterns. Elena sank into the nearest chair, her legs suddenly unreliable. She'd spent her career listening to the cosmos, searching for any whisper of intelligence among the star-drunk silence. Now that whisper had become a shout, and it was speaking in mathematics, so elegant it could only have come from a mind that understood the universe at its deepest level. "Sir," called Technician Rodriguez from Station 3, his voice cracking. With excitement and terror, the signal's getting stronger, and it's responding to our transmission protocols. Responding how? Harrison demanded. It's echoing our test sequences back to us, but with modifications. Like it's trying to establish a communication framework. The room fell silent, except for the steady hum of cooling fans and the soft clicking of keyboards. Lena stared at the data streams, her mind racing through the implications. First contact with an alien intelligence, the moment humanity had dreamed of and feared in equal measure. And it was happening in a converted military bunker in the middle of nowhere, witnessed by a skeleton crew of insomniacs and night shift workers. "We need to contact Washington immediately," Harrison said, reaching for the secure phone. Wait. The word left Elena's lips before she'd consciously decided to speak. Every face in the room turned toward her, and she felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. Before we bring in the government, before this becomes a military operation, shouldn't we try to understand what we're dealing with? Harrison's hand froze over the phone. "Dr. Vasquez, you're suggesting we delay reporting a potential first contact event?" "I'm suggesting we take the time to do this right." Elena stood, moving closer to the main display where the alien mathematics continued their beautiful, terrifying dance. "Once we make that call, this facility will be swarmed with military personnel and government officials who see everything as either a threat or an opportunity to exploit. This could be the most important moment in human history. We owe it to ourselves and to whoever is trying to reach us to approach it with science, not fear. The silence stretched taut as a wire. Elena could feel her career hanging in the balance. Could almost hear the sound of her security clearance being revoked and her reputation crumbling. But she'd already lost everything once before. It's in a Moscow laboratory, when her research had been deemed too dangerous for civilian hands. She wouldn't let it happen again. How long? Harrison asked finally. Give me 6 hours. Let me establish proper communication protocols. Verify the signal's origin and determine their intentions before we turn this into a circus. Harrison studied her face, and Elena wondered what he saw there. The ambitious young physicist who'd earned her doctorate at 24? The broken woman who'd fled Russia after her father's death? Or something else entirely, forged in the crucible of the last 3 years of exile and isolation? 6 hours, he said finally. But the moment this situation escalates beyond our control, I'm making the call. Elena nodded, already moving toward Station 7, where the alien signal continued its patient, mathematical conversation with the void. As she settled into the operator's chair and began configuring the communication array, she felt the familiar thrill of discovery coursing through her veins. She also felt something else, something that made her hands tremble as she worked. The certainty that whoever was out there in the darkness between stars was about to change everything. She thought she knew about the universe and about herself. The signal pulsed stronger, as if responding to her presence, and Elena leaned forward into the glow of the monitors, ready to speak to the infinite. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Elena continued sipping it anyway, the bitter liquid keeping her grounded as she watched impossible things unfold across her monitors. The alien intelligence had moved beyond simple mathematical exchanges. Now it was transmitting complex three-dimensional structures, architectural blueprints of something vast and incomprehensible. It's learning our symbolic language faster than our best AI systems. She murmured to Dr. Chen, who had refused to leave his post despite the early morning hour. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually precise movements had become erratic, with exhaustion and adrenaline. Learning or teaching? Chen asked, pointing at the newest transmission sequence. Look at this pattern here, showing us how to optimize our power grid efficiency by 30%. These aren't random architectural plans, Elena. It's giving us blueprints for technology we won't develop for another 50 years. The control room had emptied as the night shift ended, leaving only essential personnel. Elena preferred it this way. Fewer witnesses to what she was beginning to suspect was not just first contact, but something far more dangerous. The being on the other end of the transmission wasn't just intelligent. It was impossibly advanced, and it seemed to know exactly what humanity needed to hear. Dr. Vasquez. Harrison's voice cut through her concentration like a blade. She turned to find him standing in the doorway, but he wasn't alone. A tall man in an expensive black suit stood beside him, his pale eyes scanning the room with the methodical attention of someone trained to identify threats. Everything about him screamed federal agent, from his perfectly knotted tie to the slight bulge under his left armpit that suggested a shoulder. Elena's blood turned to ice water. Director, you said 6 hours. Plans change. Harrison's face was granite, unreadable. Dr. Vasquez. Agent David Kane, NSA. Agent Kane, Dr. Elena Vasquez, our lead communications specialist. Kane stepped forward, extending a hand that Elena reluctantly shook. His grip was firm, confident, and his smile never reached those cold, calculating eyes. Dr. Vasquez, I've read your file. Impressive work on quantum communication theory. Research in Moscow was particularly fascinating before you came to work for us. The words hit her like a physical blow. Elena fought to keep her expression neutral, but she could feel Chen's questioning gaze on her. In 3 years working together, she'd never mentioned her previous research, never mentioned why she'd really left Russia. I'm afraid I don't understand, she said carefully. Of course not. Kane's smile widened, and Elena glimpsed something predatory beneath the surface. Theoretical physics can be so abstract. But your current work seems much more practical. May I see what our new friends are saying? Elena hesitated, glancing at Harrison for support, but the director's face remained closed off. Whatever Kane had told him in private had shifted the power dynamic completely. She had no choice but to gesture toward the displays. Kane studied the streaming data with an intensity that made Elena's skin crawl. He understood what he was looking at, she realized. This wasn't his first exposure to the signal. Remarkable, Kane said finally. They're offering us technology in exchange for information about our planet. Atmospheric composition, biological samples, cultural data. Quite generous, really. How do you know what they're offering? Elena demanded. You've been here for 5 minutes. Kane turned those pale eyes on her, and she felt like a mouse being studied by a snake. Dr. Vasquez, we've been monitoring this facility's communications for some time now. Your reputation for brilliant but reckless behavior precedes you. Moscow, 2019. The quantum entanglement project that killed your research partner and nearly started an international incident. The words hit her like a sledgehammer to the chest. Elena heard Chen's sharp intake of breath, felt the weight of stares from the few remaining technicians. Her past, the secret she'd buried beneath 3 years of exile and careful reinvention, lay exposed under the harsh fluorescent lights. That's enough, she whispered. But Kane wasn't finished. Dmitry Petrov, wasn't it? You're a research partner, and if I'm reading the files correctly, your fiancé is dead at 26 because you pushed the boundaries of quantum mechanics too far. The Russian government was very unhappy about the security breach that followed. Something about classified military applications. Lena's vision blurred with rage and grief. Dmitry's face flashed before her eyes, brilliant and laughing, the way he'd looked the morning before everything went wrong. Before her calculations failed, and the quantum field collapsed in a cascade of destruction that had torn him apart at the atomic level. You bastard, she breathed, taking a step toward Kane. Elena, don't. Chen's hand closed on her arm, gentle but firm. He's trying to provoke you. Kane chuckled, a sound like breaking glass. Dr. Chen is correct. I apologize for the harsh introduction. Dr. Vasquez, but I needed to establish the stakes. You see, this facility and everyone in it are now under federal oversight. The signal represents a potential threat to national security, and your history of reckless decision-making makes you a liability. The signal isn't a threat, Elena said through gritted teeth. It's an opportunity. They're trying to help us. Are they? Kane moved to the main display, studying the alien blueprints with those calculating eyes. Or are they gathering intelligence for an invasion? Your emotional attachment to this discovery is clouding your judgment, just like it did in Moscow. Elena felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest, a familiar rage that she'd thought buried with Dmitry's ashes. You don't know anything about what happened in Moscow. I know enough. Kane turned back to her, and his expression was almost sympathetic. Almost. I know that brilliant scientists sometimes make terrible mistakes when they let their hearts rule their heads. I know that entire civilizations can fall because someone trusted the wrong intelligence. The alien signal pulsed stronger, as if responding to the tension in the room. New data streams cascaded across the monitors, more complex than anything they'd received before. Lena glanced at the readouts and felt her blood freeze. The beings weren't just transmitting blueprints anymore. They were transmitting detailed maps of Earth's military installations, satellite networks, and communication infrastructure. Information they shouldn't have had access to. Information that suggested they'd been watching humanity far longer than anyone had realized. Kane saw her expression change and nodded grimly. Now do you understand, Dr. Vasquez? Your new friends aren't just offering help. They're demonstrating exactly how much they already know about us. And that makes them either the greatest gift in human history or the most dangerous threat we've ever faced. Lena stared at the impossible data streams, her mind racing through the implications. Everything she'd believed about the signal, about first contact, about the benevolent nature of whoever was trying to reach them, crumbled like sandcastles before a tsunami. What do you want from me? She asked quietly. Kane's smile returned, cold and sharp as winter moonlight. I want you to keep talking to them, Dr. Vasquez. I want you to learn everything they're willing to share. And then I want you to help me figure out how to kill them before they do the same to us." The signal pulsed again, stronger than ever. And Elena wondered if the beings on the other end could somehow sense the shift in humanity's response. If they knew that their gesture of friendship had just become the opening move in a war that could destroy both civilizations. Elena's fingers trembled over the keyboard as she composed her response to the alien intelligence, each keystroke feeling like a betrayal. 3 days had passed since Kane's arrival. 3 days of careful lies and manufactured curiosity designed to extract information while concealing humanity's growing paranoia. The underground facility now crawled with federal agents and military personnel, their presence transforming the scientific sanctuary into something that felt more like a war room. "Ask them about their propulsion systems," Kane instructed from his position behind her chair. His breath was warm against her neck, a constant reminder of the invisible chains that bound her to this deception. "We need to understand how they traveled here." Elena typed the query, her stomach churning with each symbol. Through the reinforced glass of the control room, she could see technicians installing new equipment. Devices whose purpose Kane had refused to explain, but which hummed with ominous energy. Whatever the government was planning, it went far beyond simple communication. The alien response came within seconds, as it always did. Complex mathematical formulations flowed across her screen, describing technologies that bent space-time itself. Elena translated the data automatically, her mind parsing concepts that should have taken human scientists centuries to develop. "They're not traveling through space," she reported, her voice hollow. "They're folding it, creating stable wormholes that allow instantaneous transit across galactic distances. The energy requirements alone should be impossible." Kane leaned closer, studying the data with hungry eyes. "How many ships?" Elena's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. The question felt like crossing a line from which there could be no return. But Kane's hand settled on her shoulder, his grip just firm enough to remind her of the alternatives. She asked the question. The response made her blood freeze. Images flooded her monitors. 3-dimensional representations of vast geometric structures drifting in the void between stars. Not ships in any sense, she understood, but something far more terrifying. Cities, entire civilizations compressed into crystalline. Matrices that could fold space and emerge anywhere in the galaxy. Thousands, she whispered. Maybe tens of thousands. "They're not just visitors, Kane. They're nomads. Their entire civilization is mobile." Kane's grip tightened on her shoulder. "Are they armed?" "I can't ask them that directly. It would reveal our intentions." "Then be clever about it. You're the expert on alien psychology, Dr. Vasquez. Find out what they're capable of." Lena stared at the alien city ships drifting across. Her screen, their crystalline beauty masking implications that made her soul ache. These beings had mastered technologies that humanity could barely conceive, had built a civilization that could cross the galaxy at will. If they meant harm, nothing could stop them. If they didn't, humanity was about to commit the greatest atrocity. In cosmic history, Dr. Vasquez. The voice belonged to Dr. Chen, who stood in the doorway looking haggard and defeated. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually neat appearance had deteriorated under the stress of the past few days. "May I speak with you privately?" Kane's hand remained on Elena's shoulder. "Dr. Chen, anything you need to discuss can be said in front of me." "With respect, Agent Kane, this is a scientific matter that requires expertise you don't possess."
Elena
felt the tension ratchet higher, saw Kane's jaw clench with barely controlled irritation. The federal agent wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by exhausted physicists in wrinkled lab coats. 5 minutes, Kane said finally. "And Dr. Vasquez remains where I can see her." Chen nodded and moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Elena could hear. "The new equipment they're installing. Do you know what it is?" Elena shook her head, though she'd had her suspicions. "Weapons," Chen breathed. "Particle beam arrays designed to overload electronic systems. They're planning to use the communication array as a targeting beacon." Elena's vision blurred with horror. The aliens had shared their location willingly, had transmitted detailed coordinates as part of their peaceful contact protocol. They trusted humanity enough to reveal their exact position in space, and Kane was planning to use that trust to destroy them. When she whispered. 12 hours. They're calling it a preemptive strike. Elena glanced at her monitors, where the alien intelligence continued its patient exchange of scientific data. The beings on the other end had no idea that their gesture, a friendship, was about to become their death sentence. They were probably celebrating their first contact with a new intelligent species, dreaming of the possibilities that such a meeting could bring to both civilizations. Instead, they were about to learn the darkest truth about humanity. Chen, she breathed. We have to warn them. Kane has monitoring software on every system. The moment you deviate from the approved communication protocols, he'll know. Lena stared at the flowing data streams, her mind racing through possibilities. There had to be a way to communicate the danger without triggering Kane's surveillance systems. The aliens had demonstrated incredible intelligence and pattern recognition abilities. If she could embed a warning in the scientific data somehow, disguise it as routine information exchange. The quantum entanglement formulas, she whispered suddenly, from the Moscow project. If I transmit the failed calculations, the ones that killed Dmitri, they'll recognize the pattern. Any civilization advanced enough to fold space would understand what went wrong. Elena, those calculations are classified. If Kane realizes what you're transmitting, he'll arrest me. Maybe worse. Elena looked at Chen, seeing her own desperate determination reflected in his tired eyes. But if I don't try, we'll have genocide on our hands. Billions of innocent beings destroyed because we were too afraid to give peace a chance. The alien signal pulsed stronger, as if sensing the urgency of the moment. New data cascaded across Elena's monitors, mathematical poetry that spoke of wonder and hope and the infinite, possibilities that awaited to civilizations reaching across the void to touch minds. In 12 hours, it would all be silence. Fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling with the weight of the decision before her. Dimitri's face flashed before her eyes, brilliant and trusting. The way he'd looked in the moments before her calculations failed and tore him apart. She'd already killed one person she loved through her arrogance and reckless pursuit of knowledge. Was she about to do it again on a galactic scale? Or was this her chance at redemption? Her opportunity to prove that some truths were worth any sacrifice? Kane's voice cut through her thoughts like a blade. Dr. Vasquez, transmit their current position data to the targeting computers. It's time. To end this charade, Lena stared at the keyboard, her vision blurring with tears she refused to shed. Dimitri's ghost seemed to hover at her shoulder, whispering words of forgiveness or condemnation. She couldn't tell which. She began to type. Elena's fingers moved across the keyboard with desperate precision, embedding Dimitri's failed quantum entanglement formulas within routine astrophysical data. Each keystroke felt like a prayer sent into the void, a desperate gamble that the alien intelligence would recognize the warning hidden in humanity's greatest scientific failure. Kane stood behind her, his pale eyes fixed on the monitors as targeting data streamed to the military installations now surrounding the facility. He had no idea that the woman he'd manipulated and coerced was about to commit treason on an interstellar scale. The alien response came faster than ever before. A sudden cascade of mathematical symbols that made Elena's breath catch in her throat. They understood. The beings on the other end of the transmission had recognized Dimitri's calculations, had grasped their implications with terrifying clarity. But their response wasn't what she'd expected. Instead of fleeing, they were transmitting something else entirely. Technical specifications, weapon schematics, defensive capabilities that dwarfed anything in humanity's arsenal. What are they sending? Kane demanded, leaning over Elena's shoulder to study the data streams. Elena stared at the impossible technologies flowing across her screen, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Devices that could manipulate matter at the quantum level. Weapons that could unravel the fundamental forces holding atoms together. At shields that operated by creating localized distortions in space-time itself. They're showing us how outmatched we are, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the humming of cooling fans. They could have destroyed Earth 1,000 times over before we even detected their presence. Kane's hand closed on her shoulder, like a steel trap. Are you sure? Lena nodded, highlighting the relevant sections of the transmission. Look at these energy output calculations. Single one of their city ships could sterilize our entire solar system. They have technologies that make our nuclear weapons look like stone knives. For the first time since his arrival, Kane looked genuinely shaken. The color drained from his face as he studied the alien schematics, his mind no doubt racing through the implications. Humanity had been preparing to attack a civilization that could erase them from existence with casual ease. Us this? Kane asked, his voice tight with something that might have been fear. Before Elena could respond, new data began flowing across her monitors. Not technical specifications this time, but something far more unsettling: historical records. The rise and fall of civilizations across the galaxy, species that had achieved spaceflight only to destroy themselves through fear and xenophobia. War after war, extinction after extinction, an endless cycle of violence that had reduced the galaxy to scattered nomad fleets and empty worlds. The aliens were showing humanity its future. Jesus Christ, Chen breathed from beside Elena's chair. They're not invaders. They're survivors. It's the last remnants of a galaxy that tore itself apart. Elena scrolled through the historical data, her heart breaking with each new revelation. Hundreds of species, thousands of civilizations, all reduced to wandering refugees because they'd chosen fear over hope when first contact came. The beings trying to communicate with Earth weren't conquerors. They were the galaxy's memory keepers, carrying the stories of the dead across the void, in search of someone who might choose differently. How many are left? Elena asked, her fingers trembling as she composed the query. The answer came as a single, devastating number that made her stomach clench with grief. 12 ships. 12 surviving vessels carrying the last representatives of 1,000 dead worlds. The galaxy that had once teemed with life and wonder had been reduced to a handful of nomads desperately seeking someone. Anyone who might break the cycle of violence that had consumed everything they'd ever loved. Kane stared at the data in silence, his face cycling through expressions of shock, fear, and something that might have been shame. The great threat to humanity consisted of 12 refugee ships carrying the galaxy's last survivors. Sir, a technician called from across the control room. Weapons array is fully charged and locked onto target coordinates. We can fire on your command. Kane looked at Elena, then at the streaming data that told the story of the galaxy's self-destruction. His hand moved toward the communication device that would order the attack, then stopped. Agent Kane, Elena said quietly, what if we're the ones they've been looking for? What if we're the species that finally chooses peace over paranoia? And what if we're wrong? Kane's voice was hollow, haunted. What if this is all an elaborate deception designed to make us lower our defenses? Elena turned in her chair to face him directly, seeing not the cold federal agent who'd tormented her for days, but a frightened man carrying the weight of humanity's future. Then we die as we lived, afraid of everything we didn't understand. At the alien signal pulsed again, and new data began flowing across the monitors. Not technical specifications or historical records this time, but something that made Elena's eyes fill with tears she no longer tried to hide. Art. Music transcribed into mathematical notation. Poetry written in the languages of dead civilizations. Cultural treasures of 1,000 worlds, preserved and transmitted across the void as humanity's first gift from the stars. They're sharing their souls with us, Elena whispered. Everything beautiful that survived the galaxy's wars, they're offering it freely. No conditions, no demands for reciprocity. Just beauty shared between species who found each other in the darkness. Kane stared at the monitors, his hands still hovering over the communication device. The facility around them hummed with deadly energy, particle beam arrays charged and ready to murder the galaxy's last hope for peace. One word from him would end the transmission forever. It would silence the voices of the dead and ensure that humanity joined them in extinction. Sir, the technician called again. Your orders? Elena watched Kane's face, seeing the moment when fear and wonder warred for control of his soul. Dimitri's ghost seemed to hover between them, whispering words of forgiveness for the mistakes of the past and hope for the choices of the future. The alien transmission pulsed stronger, as if the beings on the other end sensed the moment of decision. More art flowed across the screens, the creative legacy of civilizations that had dreamed of peace. Even as they prepared for war, Kane's finger moved toward the communication device. Elena closed her eyes, waiting for the word that would either save two civilizations or damn them both to the silence between stars. "Stand down," Kane said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "All weapon systems, stand down immediately." Elena opened her eyes to find Kane staring at her with something that might have been respect mixed with terror. Around them, the facility's deadly hum began to fade as the particle beam arrays powered down. "What happens now?" she asked. Kane looked at the monitors where alien art continued its beautiful dance across the screens, carrying messages of hope from the ruins. "Of 1,000 worlds, now we find out if humanity is worthy of the gift we've been given. And God help us all if we're not." 6 months after first contact, Elena stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, watching the impossible sight of 12 alien city ships hanging in Earth's orbit like crystalline cathedrals against the star-drunk void. Each vessel stretched for kilometers, their surfaces rippling with patterns of light that pulsed in rhythm with transmissions from the planet below. Humanity's first interstellar diplomats were finally coming home. The integration had been anything but smooth. Fear still poisoned much of the planet's response to their cosmic visitors. Fed by politicians who saw opportunity in xenophobia and military leaders who couldn't accept that humanity's weapons were useless against technology millennia more advanced, 3 governments had fallen in the chaos that followed disclosure. 2 more wars had started and ended when the aliens simply disabled every weapon system on both sides, forcing negotiation through the elegant application of superior technology. But there had been wonders too. Medical advances that eliminated cancer and genetic disorders, agricultural techniques that could feed the world 3 times over, art forms that transcended human understanding of beauty, created through the marriage of alien mathematics and human emotion. Elena had been there. For all of it, serving as humanity's primary interpreter in the delicate dance of first contact diplomacy. The aliens, who called themselves the Collective of Remnants, had been patient with humanity's stumbling steps toward cosmic citizenship. They understood fear, having seen it destroy civilization after civilization across the galaxy. They also understood hope, because they carried the dreams of 1,000 dead worlds in their crystalline memory banks. Dr. Vasquez. The voice belonged to Ambassador Kethter, the Collective's primary representative to Earth. Their form was humanoid, but translucent. A being of living crystal and pure thought who could reshape themselves at will. They had chosen to appear human-like out of courtesy, though their true form was something far more beautiful and alien. Ambassador Elena replied, turning from the viewport. "The Integration Council is ready for your address." Kethtar's crystalline features shifted into what Elena had learned to recognize as their species equivalent of a smile. "Are they ready to hear what we have to offer?" Elena considered the question carefully. The Integration Council represented every nation on Earth, though their unity was fragile and constantly threatened by the fear that still gripped much of humanity. Some members genuinely wanted to learn from the Collective's vast knowledge. Others attended only to ensure their nations weren't left behind in the cosmic race that had suddenly begun. A few came because they still harbored dreams of somehow stealing alien technology for military advantage. Some of them are, Elena said honestly. Others are still working through their fears. "Fear is natural," Kethter replied, their voice like crystal chimes in a gentle wind. "We have observed this pattern countless times across the galaxy. The question is whether humanity will transcend that fear or be consumed by it." They moved to stand beside Elena at the viewport, their crystalline form refracting the light from the alien ships into rainbow patterns that danced across the station's walls. "You know what we're going to ask them to do?" Elena nodded, her stomach tight with anxiety. The Collective's true purpose had become clear over the months of contact. They weren't just refugees seeking shelter. They were gardeners, tending the seeds of civilization wherever they found them, trying to nurture species that might succeed where so many had failed. But their method of cultivation came with a price that would test humanity's commitment to cosmic citizenship. "You want us to help you reach other worlds," Elena said? "To serve as intermediaries with species that might be more receptive to contact from beings that look like them, rather than living crystal. The galaxy is full of young species taking their first tentative steps into space. Kethtar confirmed. Most will follow the same path that destroyed our predecessors. They will encounter the unknown and respond with fear, building weapons instead of communication arrays, choosing conquest over cooperation, unless someone shows them a different way. Elena stared out at the alien ships, each one containing the preserved knowledge and culture of species that had made the wrong choice. Humanity was being offered the chance to join the collective's mission, to become shepherds of galactic peace instead of just another cautionary tale. But the price was steep. It would mean leaving Earth behind, becoming nomads like the collective themselves. It would mean trading humanity's childhood among familiar stars for an adulthood spent wandering the galaxy, seeking others who might be ready to choose wisdom over fear. Will they accept? Kethtar asked. Elena thought of Kane, who had resigned from the NSA to become humanity's ambassador to the collective. She thought of Chen, who had volunteered to be among the first humans to permanently join a city ship crew. She thought of the millions of people who had overcome their initial terror to embrace the possibilities that first contact offered. She also thought of the protests outside government buildings, the terrorist attacks on integration facilities, the politicians who still called for military action against the alien invaders. Humanity was divided, as it had always been, between those who reached for the stars and those who cowered in fear of the infinite. Some of them will, she said finally. The question is whether it will be enough. Kethtar's form shimmered with what Elena had learned was their equivalent of sadness. It will have to be. The galaxy has waited too long for hope. It cannot let fear claim another species. They turned to face Elena directly, their crystalline eyes reflecting depths of sorrow accumulated over millennia of failure. You understand that you cannot return home once this choice is made. The humans who join our mission will become something new, citizens of the galaxy rather than children of Earth. You will carry your species' legacy to the stars. But Earth itself will become just a memory. Elena felt tears she hadn't expected sliding down her cheeks. She thought of her small apartment in the desert facility, the only place she'd called home since fleeing Russia. She thought of the blue sky and white clouds of Earth, the simple beauty of a world that had given birth to both Mozart and nuclear weapons, to poetry and genocide, to love and unimaginable cruelty. How many will you need? She asked. 10,000 to start. Scientists, artists, diplomats, teachers, the best and brightest of your species, willing to carry humanity's wisdom to other worlds. Elena nodded, understanding the magnitude of what was being asked. 10,000 souls, trading their birthright as children of Earth for the responsibility of guiding younger civilizations toward the light. It was the greatest sacrifice and the greatest honor any species had ever been offered. I'll go, she said quietly. Someone needs to represent the humans who choose hope over fear. Kethtar's crystalline form brightened with what Elena recognized as joy. We hoped you would say that. Your experience with loss and redemption makes you uniquely qualified to help others facing the same choice that destroyed so many before. Then Elena turned back to the viewport, watching Earth turn slowly beneath them like a blue and white jewel suspended in the cosmic dark. Somewhere down there, Dmitri's grave lay beneath Russian snow, marked only by a simple stone that bore his name and dates. She had carried his death as a burden for years, believing herself responsible for the destruction of everything they'd dreamed of, building together. Now, she understood that his sacrifice had been preparing her for this moment, for the chance to ensure that other species didn't repeat humanity's mistakes or her own. When do we leave? She asked. The Integration Council will vote tomorrow, Kethtar replied. If they choose to join our mission, the first expedition ships will depart within the year. We have identified 17 young civilizations that show promise. The closest is only 40 light years away. Elena felt a familiar thrill of discovery course through her veins. The same excitement she'd experienced the night she'd first detected the collective signal, but this time, the unknown held promise instead of fear. The next morning, Elena stood before the Integration Council as they cast their votes. Representatives from every nation on Earth argued and debated, their voices echoing through the vast chamber with the weight of history. Some spoke of duty to humanity's future among the stars. Others warned of abandoning Earth to chase alien dreams. In the end, the vote was closer than Elena had hoped, but decisive enough to matter. 57% of Earth's governments agreed to support the galactic mission. Within hours, volunteers began streaming toward the integration centers. Teachers and scientists and artists, ready to trade everything familiar for the chance to nurture wisdom across the galaxy. Kane found Elena in the observation lounge as she watched the first volunteer. Ships dock with the collective's city vessels. His face had aged years in the months since first contact, but his eyes held a peace she'd never seen during their first hostile encounters. Having second thoughts? He asked, settling into the chair beside her. Every minute, Elena admitted. But not about going, about whether we're worthy of what they're offering us. Kane was quiet for a long moment, watching as human and alien crews worked together to prepare the expedition ships. You know what I keep thinking about? That night when I almost ordered the attack. How close we came to murdering the galaxies. Last hope because we were too afraid to trust. But you didn't, Elena reminded him. When it mattered, you chose differently. Because of you. Because you showed me that some things are worth risking everything for. Kane looked at her with something that might have been admiration, mixed with regret. I'm not going with you. Someone needs to stay and help Earth process what we've learned. But I want you to know that you're carrying the best of us out there. Elena felt fresh tears threatening as she watched her former enemy grapple with emotions he'd spent his career suppressing. What about the worst of us? The fear and hatred that nearly destroyed everything. You'll carry that too, Kane said simply. And maybe that's what makes you the right choice for this mission. You understand? Both sides of human nature. You know what we're capable of at our worst and our best? As Elena watched the stars wheel slowly past the viewport, she thought about Dimitri's gentle hands and brilliant mind. About the quantum equations that had torn him apart and nearly ended her world. She thought about the Moscow laboratory, where love and ambition had collided with tragic results, and about the gift that tragedy had given her, the knowledge that some mistakes could teach wisdom, instead of just bringing sorrow. In 3 days, she would board the city's ship that would become her new home, trading Earth's gravity for the artificial fields that held the collective's vessels together. She would learn to see through crystalline senses and think in mathematical languages that human minds had never evolved to comprehend. She would become something new, a bridge between species, carrying human dreams to worlds that had never seen Saul's light. The thought terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. Dr. Vasquez? Kethter appeared beside her chair, their form shimmering with anticipation. The first expedition ship is ready for your inspection. We've prepared living quarters that should accommodate human needs while allowing for gradual adaptation to our technologies. Elena stood, feeling the weight of humanity's future settling on her shoulders like a cloak woven from starlight and possibility. Behind her, Earth continued its ancient dance around Sol, nurturing the billions of souls who had chosen to remain among familiar constellations. Ahead lay the infinite, populated by species that would either learn to choose wisdom over fear or join the gallery of the dead that the collective carried in their crystalline memories. She took one last look at the blue world that had given her birth, whispering a silent goodbye to Dimitri's grave and the life she'd built from the ashes of her mistakes. Then she turned toward the stars, ready to write the next chapter of humanity's story in the space between worlds where hope and terror danced their eternal waltz. The universe was vast and full of young species making their first tentative steps toward cosmic citizenship. Some would stumble and fall, as so many had before them. Others would rise to join the community of beings who had learned that love was stronger than fear, that cooperation could triumph over conquest, that the infinite held room enough for every dream that had ever been born beneath alien suns. Elena would be there to help them choose, carrying the lessons learned in Moscow laboratories and desert control rooms too. Civilizations that had never heard of Earth, she would teach them that failure could become wisdom, that betrayal could birth redemption, that even the worst mistakes could be transformed into gifts if one had the courage to learn from them. The stars called to her with voices like crystal chimes and quantum equations, singing songs of possibility that would echo across the galaxy. Until every species had heard their cosmic lullaby, Elena answered their call and walked toward the infinite, carrying humanity's best hopes into the darkness between worlds where light was born and love learned to speak in the universal language of mathematics and wonder. The end. Like this video if the story touched your heart, subscribe for more emotionally tales, and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.